Has the idea of love ever driven you to the edge, to do something wild and completely out of character? What about if that edge was in the medieval ages, a time of grand gestures and harsh realities? How far would you go to win someone over, knowing that failure could mean disgrace, ruin, or worse? Let's dive into the most extreme lengths taken between the 5th and 15th centuries to capture a heart. Number 10. The Relentless Minstrel Siege. The year was 1342, and the air around the castle of Montaigne, nestled in the green hills of Aquitaine, vibrated not with the usual sounds of clanging armor or the distant bleating of sheep, but with a persistent, almost maddening melody. Sir Armand de Valois, a knight whose courage on the battlefield was matched only by his utter lack of success in matters of the heart, had fallen deeply, irrevocably, and quite unrequitedly for Lady Isolde, the chatelaine of Montaigne. Lady Isolde, known for her sharp wit and even sharper tongue, had politely, then firmly, and finally, with an exasperated sigh, rejected Sir Armand's numerous advances. She found his earnestness cloying, his poetry clunky, and his persistent gaze unsettling. Most knights faced with such unequivocal dismissal might retreat, perhaps drown their sorrows in ale, or seek solace in the anonymity of the next tourney. Not Sir Armand. His desperation festered, turning into a plan so audacious, so utterly relentless that it bordered on the realm of genius, or perhaps pure folly. Sir Armand decided he would besiege Lady Isolde's heart, not with swords or catapults, but with song. He sought out the most renowned minstrel troupe in the region, the Chanticleer Ensemble, led by the shrewd and opportunistic Master Thibaut. Sir Armand offered them a fortune in silver, enough to buy a small manor and retire comfortably, on one condition. They were to establish themselves outside the walls of Montaigne and sing morning, noon, and night songs composed by Sir Armand himself, all dedicated to Lady Isolde. These were not just any songs. They were epic ballads recounting his supposed valiant deeds for her honor, tender laments about her coldness, and passionate declarations of eternal devotion. The lyrics were often clumsy, full of forced rhymes and overwrought metaphors, reflecting Sir Armand's limited poetic prowess. Master Thibaut, his eyes gleaming at the prospect of such wealth, accepted the commission with gusto. He and his troupe, a motley crew of lutenists, flautists, and vocalists, set up their camp just beyond the castle's outer bailey, strategically placed where their music would carry clearly into the ladies' chambers, into the great hall, and even into the kitchens. Their daily routine began at dawn with a rousing ode to Isolde's beauty, often waking the castle's inhabitants with a jarring blend of lute and high-pitched tenor. Throughout the day, as Lady Isolde attended to her duties, oversaw the castle accounts, or supervised the weaving, the mournful strains of Sir Armand's unrequited love would seep through the stone walls. During meals, the clatter of cutlery would be punctuated by heroic tales of Sir Armand's bravery, supposedly performed in her name. Even as dusk fell and the castle prepared for slumber, the minstrels would launch into a final drawn-out serenade, often a mournful ballad about the suffering of a lover denied life within Montaigne transformed. Castle guards, initially amused, then irritated, began to develop a twitch in their eyes. Cooks hummed the tunes unconsciously as they kneaded dough. Chambermaids gossiped about the latest lyrical installment. Lady Isolde herself, initially finding the entire affair an irritating novelty, found herself increasingly beleaguered. She tried to ignore it, then to dismiss it with a wave of her hand, then to scowl whenever a particularly saccharine chorus reached her ears. The sheer volume and relentless nature of the musical assault wore at her. She couldn't walk in the gardens without hearing a lament to her eyes, nor sit by the fire without a ballad detailing Sir Armand's sleepless nights. Her ladies-in-waiting, initially sympathetic, began to find it increasingly difficult to keep straight faces. Some secretly found the spectacle rather romantic, while others commiserated with Lady Isolde, understanding the slow torment of relentless, unwanted attention. Letters from neighboring lords, curious about the endless music emanating from Montaigne, began to arrive, some jesting, some expressing concern about the lady's mental state. Chroniclers of the time, such as the anonymous monk of St. Denis, noted the unusual nature of the siege, describing it as a spectacle that drew both ridicule and admiration from afar, a testament to the extremes of courtly devotion. Sir Armand, meanwhile, waited patiently in the nearby village, receiving daily reports from Master Thibaut. He spent his days composing new, equally dreadful verses, convinced that persistence paired with undeniable public declarations would eventually break through Lady Isolde's defenses. He truly believed his heart was pure, his intentions noble, and that his grand gesture was a testament to his unshakable love. He was utterly oblivious to the subtle shifts in sentiment within Montaigne, the growing exasperation that edged closer to annoyance than admiration. After nearly 6 weeks of this incessant musical bombardment, Lady Isolde's patience, renowned for its formidable strength, finally snapped. One morning, as the sun climbed above the eastern battlements and the minstrels launched into a particularly flamboyant rendition of "Isolde, my guiding star," she marched down to the castle gate. She ordered the drawbridge lowered, and with a formidable expression strode out to confront Master Thibaut and his ensemble. The music faltered as she approached, her presence radiating an undeniable authority. "Master Thibaut," she declared, her voice ringing with an icy calm that silenced the lute. "You and your troupe are most talented. However, your music has outstayed its welcome. I offer you this choice. Cease this melodic siege and return to your homes, or I shall personally ensure that Sir Armand's treasury, no matter how vast, will not be sufficient to cover the medical expenses for your throats." She paused, letting her threat hang in the morning air. "And they will do so until the very last drop of Sir Armand's coin has been spent." Master Thibaut, a man who valued his health and his earnings equally, paled. He knew Lady Isolde's reputation for executing her threats with precision. He bowed low, a look of genuine fear in his eyes. "My lady," he stammered, "the commission is concluded. We shall depart at once." Within hours, the Chanticleer ensemble had packed their instruments, their silver and their rather strained voices vanishing over the horizon. The silence that descended upon Montaigne was palpable, a profound and blessed quiet that made the gentle chirping of crickets sound like a symphony. Sir Armand, upon hearing the news, remained in his village bewildered. He never did marry Lady Isolde. Some historians suggest this incident marked a subtle shift in courtly love practices, with many nobles thereafter opting for less public and certainly less irritating displays of affection. The legend of the singing siege of Montaigne, however, persisted, a humorous and cautionary tale of a knight whose desperation knew no bounds, not even the boundaries of good taste. Number 9. The severed hand as a token of devotion. In the rugged forested lands of early 11th century Saxony, where feuds ran deep and alliances were often forged in blood, the young Lord Theron was known more for his ferocity in battle than for his romantic inclinations. Yet, even the most hardened warrior could fall prey to the intoxicating allure of love, or at least a desperate longing. Theron had fixed his gaze upon Lady Elara of Hohenfels, a woman whose beauty was famed across the Saxon territories, but whose heart remained stubbornly distant. Elara, daughter of a rival lord, considered Theron a brutish, uncultured lout, despite his considerable lands and growing military prowess. She valued intellect and refinement, qualities Theron possessed in alarmingly short supply. Theron had tried the usual methods: lavish gifts of furs and jewels, awkwardly delivered poems, scribbled by his chaplain, and even a rather embarrassing attempt at serenading her beneath her window, which ended with him tripping over a pig and breaking his lute. Aaron's frustration grew into a burning desperation. He sought counsel from his most grizzled, battle-scarred veteran, old Rolf, a man who had seen countless sieges and skirmishes. "How," Theron demanded, slamming his fist on a rough-hewn table, "does a man prove his devotion to a woman who scorns his very existence?" Old Rolf, ever practical, merely grunted. "In battle, my lord, courage is its own reward. In love, it seems, sometimes you must show a woman you would tear the world apart for her." This casual remark, intended perhaps as cynical advice, took root in Theron's desperate mind and twisted into a grotesque idea. He would show Elara that he would quite literally tear a piece of the world apart for her. A border skirmish flared up between Theron's lands and those of a minor baron who had been encroaching on his forests. This was Theron's chance. He rode into battle with a singular grim purpose. As his forces clashed with the baron's men, Theron fought with a terrifying intensity, seeking out the fiercest of his opponents. His eyes settled on a particularly imposing mercenary, a massive man known for his brutal efficiency in wielding a two-handed axe. This man, Theron decided, would be his unwitting contributor to his grand, desperate gesture. The fight was short, brutal, and utterly without mercy. Theron, driven by a desperate, almost manic energy, disarmed the mercenary, and with a swift, decisive stroke of his sword, severed the man's right hand at the wrist. The mercenary screamed, collapsing to the ground, his blood staining the muddy earth. Theron, ignoring the cries of the dying man and the stunned gasps of his own soldiers, immediately wrapped the severed limb in a piece of fine silk cloth he had brought specifically for the purpose. He then fought his way back to his retinue, his face grim, his eyes gleaming with a twisted sense of accomplishment. Upon returning to his stronghold, Theron ordered a servant to present the silk-wrapped package to Lady Elara at Hohenfels, a token of my undying devotion, wrested from my enemy with my own hand in proof of my willingness to sacrifice all for your favor. He waited, consumed by a chilling certainty that this act, this undeniable proof of his ferocity and dedication, would surely win her over. He envisioned her receiving the gift, her eyes widening in awe, her heart melting at the extreme lengths he had gone to for her. He imagined her finally seeing him, not as a brute, but as a man capable of truly extraordinary devotion. The reality, as often happens with desperate and ill-conceived plans, was far removed from Theron's gruesome fantasy. The servant, a nervous young man named Mathis, rode for 2 days, the silk-wrapped package clutched tightly to his saddlebag. He arrived at Hohenfels, his heart pounding, and was admitted to Lady Elara's chambers. He presented the package, stammering Theron's message. Lady Elara, intrigued by the unusual delivery, unfolded the silk. Collective gasp that erupted from her ladies in waiting was deafening. Lady Elara herself, known for her composure, turned a shade of sickly green. The hand, still relatively fresh, was a grisly sight, a stark and undeniable testament to the brutal realities of medieval warfare and Theron's utterly misguided intentions. Her initial shock gave way to a cold, horrified fury. She did not swoon. She did not weep. She recoiled, her face a mask of disgust. "Take this abhorrent thing out of my sight," she commanded, her voice trembling with revulsion, "and tell your master that his token of devotion is nothing but the mark of a savage. Tell him that no woman of refinement, no woman with a shred of decency would ever countenance such a barbaric display. Tell him that he has not won my heart, but solidified my utter contempt." Mathis, shaking quickly, rewrapped the hand and fled. Lady Elara immediately dispatched a letter to her father, describing the incident with chilling detail. Lord Hohenfels, enraged by the perceived insult and the sheer barbarity of the act, considered it not a romantic gesture, but an act of psychological warfare, a threat disguised as a suit. He severed all diplomatic ties with Theron, and the border skirmishes escalated into open warfare. Token of devotion became a catalyst for years of bloody conflict between their houses, a conflict that ultimately devastated both Theron's lands and Elara's family. Historians, including the later chronicler Otto of Freising, sometimes cited this incident as an example of how extreme, misguided attempts at courtship could backfire spectacularly in the brutal landscape of the medieval era. It was a stark reminder that, while bravery and ferocity were admired, an understanding of basic human decency and the preferences of the intended recipient were perhaps more important than any trophy from the battlefield. Lord Theron, despite his desperate gamble, never did win Lady Elara. He died years later in a skirmish, still fighting battles that arguably began with a severed hand and a profoundly misunderstood attempt at love. The hand itself was never recovered, but the story of its delivery became a morbid legend in the Saxon lands, a testament to the utter desperation and terrifying misjudgment of a knight who tried to win a heart by losing a hand. The grand exile and vow of monumental achievement. In the year of our Lord 1278, the sprawling Duchy of Burgundy was a crucible of noble ambition, courtly intrigue, and, for Lord Tristan de Montaigne, a profound personal anguish. Tristan, a man whose lineage stretched back to the time of Charlemagne, possessed a dashing countenance and a formidable reputation on the jousting field. Yet, all his accomplishments meant nothing to him, for the object of his singular devotion, Lady Isolde de Valois, had rejected him with a cool finality that pierced his very soul. Isobel, intelligent and spirited, found Tristan's charm superficial and his incessant boasts about his lineage tiresome. She sought a man of genuine depth and proven character, not merely inherited glory. Tristan's attempts had been plentiful and predictable. Expensive gifts that Isobel donated to the local church, flowery poems that she found trite, and declarations of love during courtly dances that she politely ignored. His desperation grew, turning into a bitter obsession. He could not bear the thought of a life without her, nor could he endure the quiet whispers of the court, the subtle glances that marked him as the rejected suitor. In a fit of despair and a desperate, misguided attempt to prove his worth beyond mere lineage, Tristan conceived a plan so radical it stunned the Burgundian court. He convened a grand assembly in his castle's great hall, inviting all the prominent nobles, including Lady Isobel and her family. Dressed in somber black, Tristan stood before them, his face pale but resolute. "I have sworn a solemn vow. Before God and all present, I shall depart these lands, exile Lady Isolde, and I shall not return until I have achieved a feat so grand, so unequivocally monumental that it will prove my worth beyond all doubt. I shall bring back a treasure, not of gold or jewels, but of deeds and glory that will make my name echo, but of deeds." Isobel, initially bemused by Tristan's theatricality, felt a prickle of unease. This was not a simple declaration. It was a desperate, public ultimatum, tying her fate, however indirectly, to his extreme endeavor. Tristan then announced his specific quest. He would journey to the Holy Land, not as a mere pilgrim, but as a crusader seeking to liberate a sacred relic from infidel hands, a relic of immense spiritual significance and historical value. He would perform this feat, he vowed, solely in Isobel's name, for her honor, and as an ultimate testament to his devotion. The following morning, Tristan, accompanied by a small retinue of loyal knights and servants, departed Burgundy, turning his back on his vast estates and the life of privilege he had known. His journey was arduous. He faced treacherous seas, desolate deserts, and hostile encounters. He proved himself a formidable warrior, fighting alongside seasoned crusaders in the Levant, his desperation fueling his ferocity. He spent years in the East, his name slowly gaining renown among the Crusader states for his courage and relentless pursuit of his goal. He joined daring raids, endured sieges, and eventually, after a perilous campaign, he participated in the liberation of a fortress rumored to hold a fragment of the True Cross, a relic highly coveted by all of Christendom. Tristan, amidst the chaos and bloodshed, secured the fragment, a small, splintered piece of aged wood which he painstakingly authenticated through monastic scholars in Jerusalem. He carefully encased it in a silver reliquary, bearing the crest of Montaigne and subtly a stylized I for Isabel. His grand achievement was complete. News of his success, embellished and magnified by traveling merchants and returning pilgrims, slowly trickled back to Burgundy. The relic was deemed genuine, and Tristan was hailed as a hero, a pious warrior who had brought glory not only to himself but to his ancestral lands. His name was indeed echoing across Christendom, just as he had vowed. After 7 long years, Tristan de Montaigne returned to Burgundy, his face tanned and hardened by sun and battle, his eyes possessing a new, quiet intensity. He was no longer the superficial nobleman Isabel had scorned. He had endured hardship, faced death, and emerged a changed man, carrying a relic that represented monumental sacrifice and triumph. His return was met with a hero's welcome. The populace cheered, the nobles flocked to him, and the church celebrated his pious deed. Finally, he sought out Lady Isabel. She received him in her solar, her expression unreadable. He presented the relic, a simple silver reliquary containing the sacred splinter, a symbol of his desperate vow. "Isabel," he said, his voice deeper, more resonant than she remembered, "I have fulfilled my vow. I have returned, having achieved a feat of such magnitude that it has, I hope, proven my character. This, and all my accomplishments, I lay at your feet. As a testament to my enduring love." She saw the scars of battle, the lines of hardship etched around his eyes, and the undeniable aura of a man who had faced the world and conquered it. She was undeniably impressed. The young, vain Tristan was gone, replaced by a man of substance. Her heart, once firmly closed, felt a tremor. However, the path to her heart had been paved with his desperate public vow, a vow that, while impressive, had also placed an immense burden upon her. Every whisper of his journey, every prayer for his success, had implicitly linked her to his extreme endeavor. She had been made the unwilling arbiter of his suffering and his triumph. "Lord Tristan," she began, her voice soft but clear, "you have indeed achieved a monumental feat. Your courage and devotion are beyond question. You have honored your vow and brought great renown to your name." She paused, her gaze meeting his. "But you have also shown me a desperation that sought to bind me to your ambition. My heart, Lord Tristan, is not a prize to be claimed through public display, no matter how glorious the deed." She did not accept his proposal. Her admiration was real, her respect earned. But the foundation of their potential relationship had been built on a desperate public wager rather than genuine connection. The very extremity of his gesture while proving his capabilities also revealed the underlying need to force her hand to make her succumb to the weight of his sacrifice. Tristan de Montaigne remained a hero, lauded by many, but he never won Isabel's hand. He eventually married a more practical noblewoman, content with a different kind of alliance, forever marked by his grand exile and the desperate quest for a love that remained just out of reach. The story of his journey, though, continued to be told, a cautionary tale of how even the most epic of achievements could fail to bridge the gap between a desperate heart and an unwilling one. Number 7. The love potion gone, horribly awry. In the shadows of 14th century Paris, a city teeming with scholars, artisans, and burgeoning alchemists, lived a young noblewoman named Lady Margot. She was not of the highest birth, but her family possessed enough land and prestige to secure her place at court. Margot harbored a secret consuming passion for Sir Julian, a knight known for his dashing looks and a reputation for being utterly unattainable. Julian, a favorite of the king, was accustomed to the adoration of ladies, and while he treated Margot with polite courtesy, he showed no particular interest in her. He was, to her despair, entirely oblivious to her fervent affections. Margot, weary of her unrequited love and driven to desperation by Julian's casual indifference, began to seek alternative, less conventional methods of winning his heart. She had heard whispers of old women in the city's poorer districts, women who possessed ancient knowledge, who could brew concoctions that could sway the heart. One afternoon, shrouded in a dark cloak, she ventured to the notorious Rue des Miracles, a narrow, winding alley known for its apothecaries and rumored practitioners of forbidden arts. There she found an old woman, hag-like and toothless, named Morwen, who claimed to possess true knowledge of love philters and binding drafts. Margot, trembling with a mixture of fear and desperate hope, explained her predicament. Morwen listened, her eyes glinting in the dim light of her cluttered dwelling. "Ah, the heart's cruel indifference," Morwen croaked, rubbing her gnarled hands. "Potions stronger than beauty, more potent than wit, is needed here. A draught that will bind his soul to yours, leaving him no choice but to adore you." Margot, desperate to believe, agreed to pay a hefty sum for such a powerful elixir. Morwen instructed her to bring specific ingredients: a lock of Sir Julian's hair, obtained by a bribed servant, a drop of his sweat, also obtained via a discreet bribe, and a shard of a broken mirror that had reflected his image. To these, Morwen added a mixture of esoteric herbs, crushed minerals, and a foul-smelling liquid distilled from unknown sources. She chanted over the bubbling cauldron, muttering arcane words, and finally produced a small vial of shimmering, iridescent liquid. "Give this to him in his drink," Morwen instructed, her voice raspy. "A single drop, no more, and his heart will turn to you as surely as the sun rises." Margot returned to the court, the vial hidden beneath her gown, her heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and dread. The next evening, during a lavish banquet in the great hall, she saw her opportunity. Sir Julian, seated at a long table, was engaged in boisterous conversation. Margot, with a trembling hand, poured a single drop of the iridescent liquid into his goblet of wine when his back was turned. She watched, her breath held, as he lifted the goblet and drank. For a few moments, nothing happened. Margot's initial surge of hope began to dwindle, replaced by a crushing wave of disappointment. Perhaps the old woman was a charlatan, her magic nothing but trickery. Then a strange transformation began. Sir Julian, mid-sentence, suddenly clutched his head. A look of confusion, then intense pain, contorted his features. His eyes, once bright and clear, began to roll wildly. He started to babble, incoherently at first, then loudly, his words disconnected and nonsensical. His face flushed a deep crimson, and he began to sweat profusely, his body racked by shivers. Panic erupted at the table. Courtiers rushed to his side, asking what ailed him. Julian, now trembling uncontrollably, clawed at his throat, his pupils dilated to an alarming degree. He let out a strange, high-pitched shriek, then collapsed to the floor, his limbs twitching violently. A royal physician was immediately summoned, but his knowledge was of little use against such an unknown affliction. Julian was carried to his chambers, his cries echoing through the castle. Margot watched horrified as her desperate attempt went horribly, terrifyingly wrong. The love potion had not induced affection, it had unleashed a virulent madness. For days, Sir Julian suffered. His fever raged, his hallucinations tormented him, and his body became a vessel of agony. He raved constantly, often screaming Margot's name, not in love, but in terrifying, paranoid accusations, believing she was a demon sent to torture him. His accusations, coupled with the strange sudden onset of his illness, raised suspicions. Whispers of witchcraft and dark arts began to circulate through the court, chilling everyone to the bone. The king, deeply concerned for his favorite knight, ordered a thorough investigation. The physician, baffled by Julian's symptoms, questioned every person who had been near him at the banquet. Mathis, the young servant who had helped Margot obtain Sir Julian's hair and sweat, was interrogated under duress. Terrified, he eventually revealed Lady Margot's desperate quest to acquire a love potion in her visit to the old woman on Rue des Miracles. Margot was immediately arrested. Under intense questioning, she confessed to everything, her initial despair now replaced by overwhelming guilt and terror. She described Morin, the strange ingredients, and the iridescent liquid. Royal guards were dispatched to Rue des Miracles, but Morin's dwelling was found abandoned, the old woman having vanished without a trace, undoubtedly sensing the unfolding disaster. Sir Julian, after weeks of agonizing suffering, slowly recovered. But he was never the same. His mind remained clouded, his memory fractured, and his once sharp intellect dulled. He was prone to fits of trembling and outbursts of fear, a shadow of his former self. His dashing reputation was shattered, replaced by pity and an uneasy avoidance from others. He eventually retired from court life, living out his days in quiet, melancholic seclusion, forever haunted by the delirium that had consumed him. Lady Margot, for her desperate act, faced the wrath of the king and the church. In medieval society, the use of magic, especially for such manipulative purposes, was considered a heinous crime, often linked to heresy. She was tried for witchcraft and attempted murder by enchantment. Despite her pleas of desperate love, the evidence of Sir Julian's suffering and her confession were undeniable. Margot was found guilty and, as a stark warning to others who might dabble in forbidden arts, was publicly executed. Her desperate attempt to win love led not to affection but to ruin, madness and death, a grim testament to the perils of meddling with forces beyond one's understanding, and a stark reminder that true love cannot be compelled by any potion. The story of Sir Julian's madness and Lady Margot's fate became a chilling cautionary tale recounted in monastic chronicles and whispered in the taverns of Paris for decades. Number 6. The Fortress of Unrequited Love. In the mid-13th century, on the windswept plains of Gascony, stood the imposing, yet incomplete, fortress of Bellegarde. Its construction was the singular, desperate obsession of Lord Henry de Montfort, a powerful, wealthy, and profoundly lovelorn nobleman. Henry had set his heart, with a singular, unyielding intensity, upon Lady Eleanor of Toulouse, a woman whose beauty was matched only by her independent spirit and her deep disinterest in Henri. Eleanor, a woman of learning and quiet dignity, found Henri's boisterous nature and unrefined manners deeply unappealing. His attempts to court her had been clumsy and overbearing, consisting of endless boastful letters and crude hunting trophies sent to her estate. Each attempt was met with a polite but firm rejection. Henri's desperation festered. He owned vast tracts of land, commanded numerous knights, and possessed a treasury that seemed bottomless. He believed that if he could not win Eleanor with charm or traditional gifts, he would impress her with a monument, a grand, enduring symbol of his devotion and his immense power. He would build her a fortress, not just any fortress, but one designed to be the most magnificent, impregnable, and aesthetically pleasing stronghold in all of Gascony, dedicated solely to her. He would name it Bellegarde, Beautiful Garde, a direct homage to her beauty, and a testament to his perceived protection. He commissioned the finest architects and master masons from across France, ignoring the astronomical costs. The fortress was designed with unprecedented grandeur, towering curtain walls of perfectly cut stone, a massive central keep adorned with intricate carvings, and vast, elegant chambers intended for Eleanor's personal use, complete with elaborate fireplace and stained glass windows depicting scenes of courtly love. On stained glass windows, The entire project was undertaken with a frantic energy, Henry personally overseeing every detail, pushing his workers to their limits. He invested the equivalent of several years' worth of his duchy's revenue into the construction, draining his coffers with reckless abandon. His vassals and advisors looked on with growing alarm. The fortress was strategically questionable, built in a relatively open area rather than on a defensible hill, chosen purely for its visibility and proximity to Eleanor's own estates. It served no true military purpose that could justify its immense cost. Its primary function, Henry declared repeatedly, was to stand as an everlasting testament to his love for Lady Eleanor. He believed that the sheer scale of the undertaking, the undeniable public declaration of his devotion etched in stone, would surely sway her heart. As the walls rose, and the sounds of hammers and chisels echoed across the plains, word of Lord Henry's grand folly spread throughout Gascony and beyond. Chroniclers of the period, such as the anonymous monk of Montaigne, described it as a structure of unparalleled beauty and unparalleled absurdity, built more for the affections of a single lady than for the defense of a realm. Lady Eleanor, initially merely amused by Henri's latest extravagant gesture, began to feel an increasing sense of discomfort. The fortress, a hulking presence on the horizon, became a constant visible reminder of his desperate, unwanted pursuit. Everywhere she went, people spoke of Bellegarde, connecting her name irrevocably to Henri's grand public display. Her own family, concerned about the potential for conflict or the shame of being linked to such a desperate and frankly ridiculous endeavor, urged her to consider her options. The fortress was beautiful, yes, but it was also a prison of sorts, a tangible representation of a man's obsession. After 3 years of relentless construction, Bellegarde was nearing completion. Henry planned a lavish dedication ceremony, expecting Eleanor to be overwhelmed by his unwavering devotion and the sheer magnificence of the structure. He sent her a formal invitation, reiterating that the fortress was built solely for her, its every stone a testament to his love. Eleanor, however, had made her decision. She recognized the desperation behind the grand gesture. It wasn't about her happiness or genuine connection. It was about Henry's desire to possess her, to force her admiration through an act of overwhelming, undeniable power. She knew that accepting his hand, even with such a magnificent gift, would mean living perpetually within the shadow of his desperate ambition, forever beholden to a monument that symbolized his control rather than true affection. On the day of the dedication, with hundreds of nobles, knights, and clergy gathered, and Henry standing proudly before his magnificent gleaming fortress, Lady Eleanor did not appear. Instead, a messenger arrived, bearing a finely sealed letter from her. Henry, his face flushed with anticipation, broke the seal and read its contents aloud, his voice booming across the assembled crowd. "My heart is not for sale, nor can it be besieged by stone walls. While I acknowledge the immense effort and resources you have expended, this fortress speaks not of love, but of a desperate possessiveness that I cannot and will not countenance. I wish you well, but my path lies elsewhere." Henry stood frozen, the letter crumpling in his hand, his face draining of color. The very monument he had poured his soul and fortune into, the ultimate expression of his desperate love, had been utterly, unequivocally rejected. The dedication ceremony quickly dissolved into awkward whispers and a scattering of guests. Henri was ruined financially and emotionally. Cost of Bellegarde had indeed been astronomical, bleeding his treasury dry. The incomplete fortress, once a symbol of his desperate hope, became a monument to his folly, a stark reminder of his spectacular failure. He died years later, a bitter and reclusive man, his lands diminished, his reputation tarnished by the fortress of folly. Lady Eleanor, meanwhile, eventually married a scholar, a man of quiet intellect and genuine affection, finding happiness far from the grand, desperate gestures that had once pursued her. Bellegarde, a half-finished shell of a fortress, stood for centuries on the Gascon plain, slowly crumbling, a desolate, imposing testament to the lengths one man went to for a love that never was. Its ruins remained a local legend, a stark reminder that even the grandest displays of wealth and power could not command the human heart. Number 5. The feigned illness for undivided attention. In the bustling court of King Louis IX of France, around the year 1250, lived Lady Adelaide de Valois, a woman of sharp intellect and captivating beauty. She was admired by many, but her heart yearned for the attention of only one, Sir Robert de Montaigne, a renowned knight whose loyalty and skill in battle were legendary. Sir Robert, however, was a man of grave demeanor and singular focus. His life revolved around military strategy, court duties, and pious observances. Treated all ladies with distant, respectful courtesy, but none truly captured his interest. Adelaide's subtle overtures, her lingering gazes, her carefully crafted compliments, all passed unnoticed by the stoic knight. Adelaide's frustration simmered, turning into a desperate yearning for Robert's undivided attention. She knew he valued duty and loyalty above all else. A conventional courtship was clearly failing. She needed something dramatic, something that would cut through his military-minded focus and bring him directly to her side, not as a suitor, but as a devoted care-var. Inspired by old romances where knights rushed to the bedsides of their ailing ladies, Adelaide concocted a desperate plan. She would feign a grave illness, one that would compel Robert to show concern, perhaps even affection, by forcing him into a position of compassionate care. She confided in her most trusted lady-in-waiting, Marie, a loyal but impressionable young woman. Marie, horrified by the deception, initially resisted, but Adelaide's desperate pleas eventually swayed her. Together they began to orchestrate the illusion. Adelaide started by appearing pale and frail, complaining of a persistent cough and a general malaise. She would subtly lean on Marie, feigning weakness, and occasionally excuse herself from courtly functions, citing sudden fatigue. The rumors began to spread among the court. Lady Adelaide was unwell. The performance escalated. Adelaide would deliberately avoid food during banquets, claiming her stomach was upset, though she would eat heartily in her private chambers. She would then appear with dark circles under her eyes, painstakingly applied with soot and shadows, making her look wan and sickly. She began to stay in her chambers more frequently, sending word that her condition was worsening. She spoke in hushed tones, claiming she felt a strange chill in her bones, or a crushing weight upon her chest. The king's own physician, a stern man named Master Gilbert, was summoned. Adelaide, well versed in the symptoms of various maladies from her extensive reading, gave a masterful performance of a mysterious ailment, baffling the good doctor with conflicting symptoms that defied easy diagnosis. Master Gilbert, stumped, could only prescribe rest and a series of unpleasant but harmless tonics. The entire court was abuzz with concern for Lady Adelaide. Her family hovered anxiously, and then the moment arrived. Adelaide sent a message to Sir Robert, delivered by a tearful Marie, stating that she felt her end was near, and she wished to see him one last time, to confess a secret. Her hope was that his strong sense of duty and chivalry would compel him to visit. Sir Robert, who had indeed heard the rumors of Adelaide's deteriorating health, felt a pang of distant concern. He was a man who respected all ladies, and a deathbed visit, especially to one of the court's most admired figures, was a solemn duty. He immediately proceeded to her chambers, his armor gleaming, his face etched with a look of dutiful concern. Adelaide lay in her bed, draped in fine linen, her face meticulously pale, her breathing shallow. The room was dimly lit, enhancing the somber atmosphere. Marie stood by her side, clutching a handkerchief to her face, sniffing dramatically. As Robert entered, Adelaide weakly extended a hand. "Sir Robert," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "I feared I would not see you again. My time is short." Robert approached the bedside, his expression softening with genuine pity. "My lady," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle, "do not despair. The physician speaks of rest and hope." "No," Adelaide sighed, a single tear escaping her eye. I feel it. But before I leave this world, I must confess my heart. It has always been yours, Sir Robert. I have loved you deeply, silently, hopelessly, and now I shall die with that love unrequited." She looked up at him with what she hoped was a heartbroken, resigned gaze. Sir Robert, caught completely off guard by this unexpected confession, stiffened. He looked down at the seemingly dying woman, then at the tearful Marie, then back at Adelaide. His face, usually unreadable, contorted into a strange mixture of pity, discomfort, and a dawning realization. He was a man of logic and practical matters. He had heard of women feigning affections, but never an illness of this magnitude. And Adelaide's sudden dramatic declaration of love, delivered with such theatrics, struck him as oddly performative, especially when juxtaposed with her apparently grave condition. He remembered the physician's baffled reports, the lack of a clear diagnosis. A suspicion, cold and unwelcome, began to form in his mind. He did not immediately confess his own feelings or declare his love. Instead, he reached out, not to comfort her, but to delicately check her wrist for a pulse. His fingers, trained to discern the subtle nuances of life on the battlefield, detected a pulse that was strong, steady, and far from that of a dying woman. He then gently placed his hand on her forehead. Her skin, though cool, felt healthy. Her eyes, though feigning weakness, flickered with an alertness that betrayed her. Sir Robert, a man of few words but sharp observation, slowly withdrew his hand. A long, uncomfortable silence filled the room. Adelaide, sensing his scrutiny, held her breath desperately, hoping her act was convincing. Finally, Sir Robert straightened up, his face grim. "Lady Adelaide," he stated, his voice devoid of pity, "it appears your condition is not as dire as you imagine. Your pulse is strong, your skin cool, and your spirit, it seems, is far from departing this world. It is clear to me that you have engaged in a deception." He paused, his gaze hardening. "And a deeply ill-advised one, to feign such a grave illness, to cause such worry to your family and the court, merely for attention, is an act of profound disrespect, not only to myself, but to those who genuinely suffer my admiration. Lady Adelaide is not won by such methods. Indeed, it is lost." He bowed stiffly, a formal, cold gesture. "I bid you good day, my lady. May your recovery be swift, and I pray your future actions be guided by more honesty." That he turned and strode out of the room, leaving a stunned and humiliated Adelaide alone with her equally shocked lady-in-waiting. The truth of Adelaide's deception quickly spread throughout the court, fueled by Sir Robert's quiet but firm statements. Her feigned illness, once a source of concern, became a source of scandal and ridicule. She lost her standing at court, her reputation shattered. Her desperate attempt to win love through manipulation had backfired spectacularly, costing her not only the admiration of Sir Robert, but also the respect of her peers. She eventually retreated to her family's estates, living out her days in quiet disgrace. A cautionary tale whispered among the ladies-in-waiting about the perils of using deception in the pursuit of affection. Sir Robert, meanwhile, continued his duties. His stoicism reinforced his resolve to remain unentangled in romantic intrigues stronger than ever. Number 4. The vow of perpetual mourning for a living soul. The year is 1185. In the powerful Duchy of Aquitaine, Lady Elara, a woman of formidable will and keen intellect, had consistently rejected the advances of Count Thibaut of Anjou. Thibaut, a man of considerable wealth and influence, was accustomed to getting his way. Elara, however, found him boorish, overly aggressive in his pursuit, and frankly quite tedious. Her rejections were polite at first, then increasingly firm. Thibaut's desperation grew, turning into a bitter resentment that he believed only Elara could alleviate by finally accepting him. He knew he couldn't force her hand, but he could, he thought, manipulate her emotions, perhaps even her guilt. conceived a plan so radical, so utterly self-sacrificing in its performative grief, that he believed it would surely melt her cold heart and awaken pity, then affection. He would publicly declare himself in perpetual mourning for her, as if she were dead, despite her being very much alive and well. He began by appearing at court in somber black attire, traditionally reserved for deep mourning periods. He eschewed all bright colors, all jewels, and even his usual cheerful demeanor. His face was perpetually drawn, his eyes downcast. He would sigh deeply, often dramatically, and speak in hushed tones about his profound sorrow. When asked about the reason for his grief, he would simply state, "My heart has died, and with it all joy has departed from my life." He would then gaze pointedly at Elara, ensuring she understood the implied meaning his performance escalated. Thibaut would withdraw from jousting tournaments, citing his profound sorrow. He would refuse invitations to feasts and merriment, choosing instead to wander alone in his gardens or sit by a cold hearth composing mournful poetry about a love lost that had never been won. He ordered his entire household to adopt a subdued atmosphere, banning music and lively conversations in his presence. He even had a small private chapel built on his estate, where he would spend hours in silent contemplation, his mourning robes draped over his shoulders, a deliberate public display of his internal anguish. The court was initially intrigued, then bewildered. Whispers circulated. Was the Count ill? Had he suffered a great loss no one knew about? When the truth began to emerge that his mourning was for Lady Elara, who was perfectly healthy, the reactions varied. Some found it deeply romantic, a testament to his profound, albeit desperate, love. Others found it utterly bizarre, a desperate plea for attention that verged on the ridiculous. Chroniclers of the time, such as the contemporary chronicler William of Tyre, described it as a display of lovesick madness, noting that such public demonstrations of unrequited affection were highly unusual and often ended poorly. Lady Elara, the unwilling object of this macabre devotion, found herself increasingly uncomfortable. His mourning cast a shadow over her own life. Everywhere she went, she was met with sympathetic glances from those who believed she was inadvertently causing such suffering, or amused glances from those who found the entire spectacle absurd. Thibaut's public grief was a constant, suffocating presence, a silent accusation. People began to subtly pressure her, suggesting that perhaps she should take pity on the poor Count, whose life had seemingly been ruined by her rejection. Thibaut, meanwhile, genuinely believed his strategy was working. He interpreted every sympathetic glance, every whispered comment, as a sign that Elara was softening, that the weight of his profound sorrow was finally impacting her conscience. He imagined her lying awake at night, tormented by his self-inflicted penance, eventually rushing to his side, overcome with remorse and newly found affection. After several months of this relentless, performative grief, Elara could no longer bear it. She found the situation suffocating, manipulative, and deeply disrespectful. She saw it not as love, but as a twisted form of emotional blackmail. She decided to confront Thibaut directly, not in public but in a private meeting at her own castle. Thibaut arrived, dressed in his customary black, his face drawn in a carefully cultivated expression of profound sorrow. He waited for her to confess her sudden affection, to offer him solace, to break his mourning. Elara sat before him, her posture regal and unyielding. "Count Thibaut," she began, her voice clear and firm, "I understand you have chosen to live your life as if I were dead, as if my rejection has brought you to this state of perpetual grief." Thibaut nodded solemnly, maintaining his tragic pose. "My lady," he began, "my heart simply cannot." Elara cut him off. "Suggests that my happiness, my very existence, should be subservient to your desire. I do not wish to be the object of your sorrow, nor the cause of your contrived torment." She rose, her voice gaining strength. "And let it be understood, my heart will never be won by a man who seeks to make me feel responsible for his manufactured misery." Thibaut, utterly deflated, could only stare at her. His theatrical display had not worked. Instead of softening her heart, it had hardened it. The next day, still dressed in black, he appeared at court, his grief still evident, but the performance lacked its former conviction. Court, having heard whispers of Eleanor's powerful rejection, now viewed his continued mourning not with pity, but with a mixture of amusement and disdain. His desperate gambit had backfired spectacularly, costing him what little respect Eleanor might have had, and making him a figure of gentle ridicule at court. He eventually abandoned his black attire and his public displays of sorrow, marrying a far less demanding woman. But the tale of the mourning count became a cautionary tale in Aquitaine, a testament to the fact that even the most elaborate, desperate displays of grief could not force a heart to yield. Number 3. The hostage pledge for a marriage alliance. The year is 1088. The borderlands between the emerging Kingdom of England and the powerful Duchy of Normandy were a volatile place marked by constant skirmishes and shifting loyalties. Lord Raoul de Montfort, a Norman baron, found himself in a precarious position. His lands were exposed, his alliances weak, and he desperately needed a strong connection to a more powerful house to secure his future. His gaze fell upon Lady Gwendolen of Sussex, the fiercely intelligent and beautiful daughter of a prominent English earl, a man whose lineage stretched back to Anglo-Saxon kings. Raoul admired Gwendolen not only for her family's strategic importance, but also for her reputation for wisdom and courage, qualities that were rare among the women of his acquaintance. He sent emissaries with proposals of marriage, detailing his wealth, his military strength, and the benefits of an alliance between their houses. However, Gwendolen's father, Earl Godwin, was wary. Norman lords were known for their ambition and occasional treachery. He also knew his daughter, who, despite the political pressures, wished to marry for something resembling respect, if not affection. Godwin politely but firmly rejected Raoul's overtures, citing the instability of the border regions and the differing customs. Raoul's desperation grew. His lands were vulnerable, his future uncertain, and Gwendolen remained stubbornly out of reach. He knew that the usual exchange of pledges and oaths would not suffice for Earl Godwin. He needed an act so profoundly reassuring, so utterly self-sacrificing, that it would demonstrate his unwavering commitment and integrity, ensuring Godwin that his daughter would be safe and cherished. He would offer himself as a hostage, a living pledge to secure the marriage. He dispatched a new solemn embassy to Earl Godwin. This time, the message was stark. Lord Raoul was not merely offering a marriage alliance. He was offering himself as a hostage to Earl Godwin's court for a full year, as a guarantee of his peaceful intentions and the sincerity of his proposal for Gwendolen's hand. During this year, he would live under Godwin's direct supervision, his movements restricted, his freedom curtailed, a living symbol of his trust and desperation. If after 1 year Gwendolen was willing to accept his proposal, and if Godwin was convinced of his good faith, then the marriage would proceed. If not, Raoul would return to his lands, having proven his commitment, but having lost his bet. Earl Godwin, renowned for his shrewdness, was astonished. Such an offer was virtually unheard of. Lords sent sons, brothers, or even valuable knights as hostages, but rarely themselves, especially a powerful lord like Raoul. It was an unprecedented act of trust, or perhaps profound desperation. He consulted with Gwendolen. She too was surprised. She had always found Raoul a little too ambitious, a little too proud. This act, however, showed a profound humility and a shocking level of commitment. It implied a desperate need for the alliance, yes, but also a willingness to put his own safety and honor on the line for her personally. It was an undeniable, if unconventional, testament to his earnestness. After much deliberation, Godwin agreed to the terms, albeit with strict conditions. Raoul was to arrive with only a small, unarmed retinue, his movements closely monitored, and any breach of trust would result in severe consequences, including his immediate imprisonment or worse. Lord Raoul, with a mix of dread and resolute hope, presented himself at Earl Godwin's fortress. He was stripped of his armor, his sword, and his usual retinue. He was given a simple chamber. His meals were brought to him, and he was always accompanied by an English guard. He became, in essence, a prisoner of honor, his desperate gamble laid bare for all to see. The year that followed was a test of endurance and humility. For Raoul, he, a proud Norman lord, spent his days among Anglo-Saxons, learning their customs, their language, and their ways. He attended court, listened to their grievances, and observed their disputes. He was not permitted to participate in military exercises or political deliberations, but he was allowed to interact with the household, including Lady Gwendolen. He saw her daily, in the great hall, in the gardens, at meals. He observed her quiet strength, her intelligent contributions to discussions, her kindness to her servants. During this year, Raoul learned patience, a virtue he had previously lacked. He could not charm her with gifts he did not possess, nor impress her with feats of arms he could not perform. All he had was his presence, his demeanor, and the quiet dignity with which he endured his self-imposed captivity. He listened to her, spoke respectfully and slowly, without the pressure of courtship. A different kind of understanding began to form between them. He saw her not as a prize, but as a woman of substance. She saw him not as a proud, ambitious Norman, but as a man capable of genuine sacrifice, whose desperate act had revealed an unexpected depth of character. As the year drew to a close, Earl Godwin summoned Gwendolen. "The Norman has kept his word," he stated. "His conduct has been honorable. The alliance, if you choose it, would be strong. The decision, my daughter, is yours." Gwendolen looked at her father, then considered Raoul. He was no longer the arrogant suitor. He was the man who had put his life and liberty at stake for her, a living testament to his earnest desire. His desperation had led him to an act that, ironically, had stripped away his usual pretense and revealed a more genuine self. "Father," she said, her voice thoughtful, "Lord Raoul has shown me a measure of commitment I had not thought possible in any man. He has humbled himself for our house, and for me I believe his intentions are true." She agreed to the marriage. Raoul, when informed of her decision, felt a wave of profound relief and a dawning sense of genuine affection. His desperate gamble had paid off, but not in the way he had originally imagined. He had won Gwendolen's hand, yes, but he had also, inadvertently, earned her respect and slowly her affection. The alliance proved to be one of the strongest in the border regions, bringing a rare period of peace and prosperity. Chroniclers like Orderic Vitalis sometimes alluded to the extraordinary circumstances of their marriage, citing it as an example of a political union transformed by an unexpected act of personal sacrifice. Lord Raoul's desperate act, born of political necessity and personal longing, became the foundation for a lasting partnership, proving that even in the brutal world of medieval politics, a profound, desperate gesture. Number 2. The Tournament of Reckless Abandon. In the year of our Lord 1302, the Duchy of Brittany buzzed with the excitement of a grand tournament hosted by Duke Jean III. Knights from all corners of France, England, and beyond gathered to display their prowess in jousts, melees, and feats of horsemanship. Among them was Sir Gareth of Nantes, a young knight of modest means, but considerable skill. Gareth, however, was consumed by a far greater ambition than mere victory. He sought to win the hand of Lady Isolde, the Duke's eldest daughter, a woman of ethereal beauty and cool, detached demeanor. Isolde, accustomed to the adoration of countless suitors, found Gareth's quiet devotion unremarkable. She barely registered his presence, her gaze reserved for the most flamboyant and celebrated knights. Gareth's usual attempts to court her had met with his usual results: polite indifference. He sent her wildflowers picked from the meadows, composed heartfelt but amateurish poems, and attempted to catch her eye across crowded halls. Nothing worked. His desperation grew, turning into a simmering resolve to prove his worth through a spectacular display of reckless courage, a performance so dramatic that it would be impossible for Isolde to ignore. He would enter the tournament, not just to win, but to perform feats of such daring and danger that his very survival would be a testament to his profound love. The tournament began. In the opening jousts, Gareth, usually a careful and strategic jouster, began to take unnecessary risks. He would choose the strongest, most renowned opponents, often those far above his station. He would charge with a ferocity that bordered on suicidal, riding his horse into crashes that would leave both horse and rider battered. During the melee, a chaotic mock battle, he would deliberately seek out multiple opponents, fighting with a wild abandon that terrified his squires and astonished the spectators. He was often dismounted, his armor dented, his body bruised, but he always rose, seizing a new weapon, and rejoining the fray with a grim determination. His fellow knights began to whisper. Some called him mad, others suicidal, but the crowd, always eager for spectacle, roared his name. Lady Isolde, initially observing the tournament with her usual detached interest, found her gaze increasingly drawn to Sir Gareth. His reckless bravery, the sheer desperation etched on his face as he plunged into danger, was undeniably compelling. He was not merely seeking victory, he was courting death. All, it seemed, for her. He would often gaze up at her before a particularly dangerous pass in the joust, or before entering a brutal melee, his eyes burning with an unspoken plea. Gareth continued to push himself to the absolute limit. In one notorious incident, during a particularly fierce joust, his lance splintered against an opponent's shield, sending splinters flying. Instead of merely breaking his lance and retreating, Gareth, in a desperate, unthinking move, hurled the remaining jagged shaft like a spear, narrowly missing his opponent's helm. It was a clear breach of tournament etiquette, but the crowd gasped, then cheered at the sheer audacity. He was warned by the heralds, but the message was clear. This knight was willing to do anything. His body began to show the toll. He sustained multiple injuries: a broken rib from a fall, a gash on his arm from a sword blow, and a persistent limp. Yet he refused to withdraw. He bound his wounds, swallowed the pain, and returned to the field, his gaze always seeking out Lady Isolde. He dedicated every brutal charge, every bruising impact, every near-fatal blow to her. He was a living, breathing testament to the proverb, "Love conquers all," even if it meant conquering himself into oblivion. Tournament culminated in a final, grand melee, a battle fought with blunted weapons but no less ferocity. Gareth entered it with a feverish determination. He fought with a relentless, almost manic energy, his movements fueled by sheer desperation. He was struck multiple times, his helm dented, his shield splintered. Yet, he kept fighting, driving himself deeper into the fray, until he found himself surrounded by 3 larger, stronger knights. He fought with the fury of a cornered beast, swinging his blunted sword with wild, desperate power. One knight fell, then another. But the third, a massive German mercenary, brought his sword down squarely on Gareth's helm. The blow sent Gareth sprawling, his body lying motionless in the dusty arena. A gasp went through the crowd. Lady Isolde, who had been watching with growing alarm and a strange, unfamiliar knot in her stomach, felt a sudden sharp pain. A wave of fear, raw and unexpected, washed over her. She watched as squires rushed to Gareth's side, carefully removing his helm. His face was pale, streaked with dirt and blood, but his eyes fluttered open. He was alive, though clearly badly injured. The tournament officials, acknowledging his incredible if reckless bravery, declared him the overall victor based on his sheer, unyielding participation and spectacular, albeit dangerous performance. He was carried from the field on a stretcher, a champion, broken but unbowed. Later that evening, after the banquets and celebrations had begun, Lady Isolde visited Sir Gareth in the infirmary. He lay on a cot, his body bandaged, his face bruised, but a flicker of hope in his eyes when he saw her. "Sir Gareth," she began, her voice soft, "you fought with a bravery I have never before witnessed. Your dedication. It was undeniable." Gareth, despite his pain, managed a weak smile. "My lady," he whispered, "every blow, every risk, every drop of sweat, it was for you to prove my love." Isolde looked down at him, her heart churning with a complex mixture of awe, pity, and a profound sense of unease. He had risked everything, endured immense pain, and pushed himself to the brink of death. It was without a doubt the most desperate and dramatic display of devotion she had ever witnessed. It had certainly captured her attention. It had even, she admitted to herself, stirred a strange and unexpected feeling within her. But it was not love. It was a mixture of admiration for his courage and a deep-seated apprehension about the kind of man who would go to such extreme, self-destructive lengths for a woman. "Your actions were truly extraordinary, but they speak of a recklessness that I cannot and will not bind myself to." She wished him a swift recovery and departed. Sir Gareth, the champion of the tournament, lay alone in the infirmary, his body aching, his heart broken. His desperate gamble, his spectacular display of reckless abandon had indeed won him glory and attention, but it had failed to win the one thing he truly desired. He recovered, of course, but the tale of his desperate tournament, and the woman who remained unmoved by his near-fatal heroics, became a legend in Brittany, a stark reminder that even the most extreme displays of valor could not force a heart to yield to a desperate love. The chronicler, Jean Froissart, though not specifically detailing this event, often spoke of the extravagant and sometimes misguided displays of chivalry which could, despite their grandeur, fail to win the lady's favor. Number 1. The forged letters of self-incrimination. The year is 1455, in the politically charged manuscript. Rich environment of Florence, a city of burgeoning Renaissance ideals but still bound by medieval social strictures. Lady Isabella de' Medici, a woman of sharp intelligence and immense family influence, found herself pursued by a persistent and rather annoying suitor, Messer Piero Strozzi. Piero, though wealthy and ambitious, possessed an inflated sense of self-importance and a penchant for grand pronouncements. Isabella, valuing honesty and subtlety, found his overtures crude and his boasts tiresome. His persistent letters, filled with saccharine compliments and thinly veiled promises of social advancement, were promptly discarded, often unread. Piero's rejection gnawed at him. He saw Isabella not just as a beautiful woman but as a crucial stepping stone to greater political power within Florence. Her continued disinterest, despite his overtures, was an affront to his pride and a significant hurdle to his ambitions. His desperation to possess her both for her hand and her influence reached a fever pitch. He knew conventional means were failing. He needed to create an illusion, a narrative that would paint him as the object of Isabella's fervent affection, forcing her hand through social pressure and the appearance of a scandalous secret courtship. He conceived a plan so audacious, so utterly dishonest, that it would make his desperate pursuit seem like a mutual passionate secret. He would forge letters from Isabella to himself, and even attempt to subtly impersonate her in correspondence with others to manipulate the situation. Piero first hired a skilled, discreet scribe, known for his ability to perfectly retouch any handwriting, to create a series of letters. These letters, supposedly from Isabella, were filled with passionate declarations of love for Piero, longing for his presence and fervent desire for their secret union. They were expertly crafted, using phrases and allusions that Isabella might employ in real correspondence, gleaned from overheard conversations and careful observation of her interactions. Some even contained subtle, invented criticisms of her own family's chosen suitors, painting them as dull or unsuitable. Piero then subtly lost these letters in places where they would be found by his own trusted gossipy servants, knowing they would quickly circulate among the court. The rumors began immediately. Whispers spread throughout Florentine society that Lady Isabella, so reserved and virtuous, was secretly enamored with Messer Piero, sending him scandalous, passionate letters. Isabella herself was bewildered by the strange glances and veiled remarks. She denied the rumors vehemently, but how could she fight against something that seemed to have tangible written proof? Piero, emboldened by the success of his initial forgery, escalated his deception. He began to discreetly intercept Isabella's actual correspondence, reading her letters, and then using his skilled scribe, would forge responses that subtly changed her meaning or implied a closer relationship with him than truly existed. He even began to forge short, seemingly innocuous notes from Isabella to other prominent figures, hinting at a secret rendezvous with him, or expressing delight at his supposed visits. For instance, a letter from Isabella to a cousin about a garden party might be intercepted, and a new postscript added purportedly from Isabella, saying, "I do hope Messer Piero will be there. His conversation is simply delightful." The original letter would then be sent, the forged postscript creating an entirely false impression. The most audacious act came when Piero learned of a formal proposal from a wealthy Milanese merchant for Isabella's hand, a match her family was seriously considering. Desperate to scuttle the rival suitor, Piero forged a scathing, emotionally charged letter purportedly from Isabella to the Milanese merchant. In this letter, Isabella supposedly rejected the merchant with cruel and mocking language, stating her heart belonged irrevocably to another and insulting his family's lineage and profession. He ensured this forged letter was delivered directly to the Milanese merchant, knowing it would cause immediate offense and likely terminate the negotiations. The plan was a dizzying web of deceit, reliant on Piero's cunning, his scribe's skill, and the often unquestioning credulity of a society that valued written documents but lacked the forensic tools to authenticate them. His desperation drove him to create an entire fictional courtship, hoping to trap Isabella through social pressure and scandalous rumor. The forged letter to the Milanese merchant, however, proved to be Piero's undoing. The merchant, enraged by the insult, immediately dispatched a formal complaint to the Medici family, including a copy of the supposed letter from Isabella. When Isabella read the letter, she was not only shocked by its content, but immediately recognized it as a forgery. Tone, the specific insults, the overly dramatic language, it was utterly unlike her, and precisely like Piero's known crude style. She remembered her usual polite, formal rejections to other suitors. This was too vile, too public, and too convenient for Piero. Isabella, with her sharp mind and the vast resources of the Medici family, did not merely deny the accusations. She launched a meticulous, discreet investigation. She compared the handwriting of the offending letter with samples of her own. She called upon her most trusted servants, quietly questioning them about any unusual occurrences involving her mail. She even employed the services of a renowned illuminator, skilled in discerning subtle nuances in ink and parchment, to examine the documents. The evidence slowly but surely pointed to Piero Strozzi. The illuminator noted discrepancies in the paper and ink not present in authentic Medici correspondence. One of Isabella's loyal scribes, upon seeing the forged letters, recognized the distinctive, almost imperceptible tremor in the hand of Piero's hired forger, a tremor he knew from prior commissions. Faced with overwhelming proof of his deceit, one of Piero's servants, fearing for his own safety, confessed to having been coerced into finding the initial forged letters. The truth of Piero's desperate, fraudulent scheme came crashing down. The Medici, family guardians of Florence's reputation, and fiercely protective of their own, were outraged not just by the personal affront to Isabella, but by the audacious attempt to manipulate alliances and shame a powerful Stropsy through forgery disgrace. The web of forged letters was exposed, his desperate, dishonest methods laid bare for all of Florence to see. He was stripped of his burgeoning political influence and faced severe financial penalties for his deception. His reputation was ruined, and he became an outcast, scorned by all who valued honor and truth. His desperate attempt to force love and marriage through elaborate, deceitful means had not only failed but had resulted in his complete social and personal ruin. Lady Isabella, meanwhile, despite the trauma of the ordeal, emerged with her reputation for integrity and discernment stronger than ever. She eventually married a man of her own choosing, a quiet scholar from a respected, albeit less prominent family, valuing genuine connection over desperate ambition. The tale of Piero Strozzi's forged letters became a cautionary legend in Florentine society, a stark reminder that even in the sophisticated courts of the Renaissance, desperate hearts could resort to the most convoluted and dishonest schemes, only to find their elaborate deceptions unruin. Chronicler Niccolò Machiavelli, in his later writings, often alluded to such cunning but ultimately self-defeating intrigues within Florentine politics, where desperate ambition could lead to utter folly.